Hi, I'm Julia Messenger, social emotional learning teacher on special assignment and clinical school social worker with Anoka Hennepin School District. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Make It Okay. This is a program brought by Health Partners, and it's working to destigmatize mental health and mental well being. We're looking forward to connecting today. I'll be going through some slides, so you won't see my face consistently. And at the end, there will be some forms to fill out to get your credit for this course. Thanks so much. Make It Okay is a program brought to you by Health Partners. I am a Make It Okay ambassador and support our district in moving forward with the work. As an intro, we are going to connect a little bit today since we are not in person and working virtually. I would like you to pause for a moment and think about your why. We're going to focus on 2 words to describe why you chose to attend this session today. This is a hard subject for many of us to discuss openly, and the goal of today is to help become more comfortable with talking about these things. So, as you're thinking about your 2 words, I also want you to think about your story. What is the story that brought these words to mind for you? At the end, there's going to be an opportunity for you to fill out a form. And if you have additional questions, please know that you can always access me via Anoka Hennepin email at julia.messenger@ahschools.us or by adding additional questions to your forms at the end of this presentation. Many of us are here for different reasons today. And Make It Okay is a community campaign to reduce stigma by increasing understanding and creating caring conversations around mental illness. Stigma is a difficult issue and it's complex. So the solution from Make It Okay is simple. We get people talking, right? We talk about how to get this messaging out there, how to make it more normalized, and how to become more welcoming and accepting of talking about mental illness, having mental illness, getting support for mental illness, and loving a person who is moving through mental illness. A little bit of history here. In 2012, Health Partners partnered with NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness, and community partners, local agencies around us to launch Make It Okay campaign. And so the intention again is reducing that stigma, increasing understanding, promoting caring conversations. And this is a community-wide effort. In schools, we see so much of our student need and our colleagues as well. The pandemic does not discriminate. The situations that people are in right now really vary for all of us, and we are all experiencing it in different ways and together at the same time, right? Both can be true. So, how do we navigate this dialogue with folks that we care for, that we work closely with? All right, so let's start the conversation. We are going to start here with a video clip.
Thank you. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So, how was your weekend?
It's good. How about you?
Yeah.
Meh. What's that? What does meh mean?
Well, with depression, some days are good days and some days are bad days. And yesterday was not one of my good days.
Silence. It makes the mental illness stigma even worse.
Do you want to talk about it?
Learn what to say at makeitokay.org.
So, what are your thoughts on this ad? As you can see by that big empty talking bubble, silence does have a huge effect on the conversation regarding mental illness. I also want to validate that sometimes we might be surprised or caught off guard or not sure of what the right thing to say is. And as humans, we sometimes get in our own head. Well, what if I say the wrong thing? I don't know what the right thing is to say. And unfortunately, that does end with pause or silence. And the hard part about silence is it can make people feel more alone or uncomfortable saying it. And we almost have, as Minnesotans especially, some of that guilt around creating, like, oh, I said, I said depression or I said I was having a hard time. Next time I just won't say that because I don't want the other person to be uncomfortable. But by starting that conversation, people know that someone cares about them and cares for their well being. Even the acknowledgement of, oh boy, I'm not sure what the right thing to say is because I want to let you know that I care about you and thank you for being honest with me. Videos like this one and other testimonials and resources can also be found on makeitokay.org. So if you're looking for other opportunities or examples, there are some great ones on the website. So, how do we start changing attitudes and reducing that stigma? What we hope to do today is begin to talk about how we might start changing those attitudes and negative perceptions around mental illness. And that's what Make It Okay is all about. While it might seem like an overwhelming task to really shift that mindset, there are three things that each of us can start doing slowly, bit by bit: learn, talk, and share. We can learn more about Make It Okay. We can fill our brains with kind of this information so that we're more able to talk openly and compassionately about the issue. And then we hope to leave today feeling equipped to share this information with other people, to start dialogue, either personally, professionally, but to hold space for some of this conversation and to increase our own comfort in order to do so. So, understanding stigma. So, think for a minute, what are some examples of stigma that come to mind? Might be thinking stereotypes or judgment, labeling are some words that come to mind. We know that stigma is very real, and we know that mental illness has developed a negative perception and connotation in our culture and in many other cultures. Stigma is a negative perception that causes someone to devalue or think less of a person. In this case, it would be because of a diagnosis or a symptom of mental illness. Stigma in any kind is negative mindset and provides no real value to society, and in generally boils down to discrimination, leaving people who have mental illness or those who are caregivers to feel that they are not as valued and are perceived as a burden or sometimes even dangerous. So, this is why we are here today, to use this time as an opportunity to reflect on how mental illnesses have been negatively portrayed and make a pact to do the best we can together to change our language, our thoughts, our attitudes around mental illness moving forward. Some common things that people experience are, I also have struggled with mental illness, or I have felt down and I moved through it, or having trouble seeing things from a different lens. If you've never experienced mental illness, you've never struggled with some of those really strong feelings and symptoms within your body. So it's really important that we are willing to kind of open our minds and help open others as well. A public survey showed most people thought mental illness was related to stress, lack of willpower, or weakness. According to regional surveys, it's known that people's knowledge of mental illness is rather limited. And truth be told, that's because we don't talk about it often, right? We don't hear about it as far as in a learning format in enough ways. Because there are beliefs that somehow mental illness is related only to stress or lack of willpower or that weakness or character failure, that also kind of fulfills itself over and over again. As people believe that, they're talking more about it, it becomes almost true as they spread it to more and more individuals around them. And so, although mental illness is not a visible illness, it is a medical condition just like anything else. You would go to the doctor for strep throat, diabetes, you manage with different medications or different lifestyle shifts. And yet, mental illness is still linked to merely thinking that people are weak or not trying hard enough. Mental illness cannot be overcome by willpower. It's not a pulling yourself up from your bootstraps kind of situation, right? Because just like any medical condition, it's biological in nature. And to think otherwise is contributing to the stigma. So, what kind of images are used to portray people experiencing mental illness? Stigma comes in a lot of different forms, and one of those is through images. So, I want you to think for a moment. You don't need to write it down, but in your brain, what images come to mind? Or have you seen in TVs, movies, ads that have portrayed a person with mental illness? And we realize sometimes these images can be hard to describe, but in this space, it's important that we really think about those images and we're honest with our own experiences and with what comes to our mind initially. What's that gut reaction when we think about an image of someone with mental illness? And images can leave a lasting impact in our minds. Our brains are very intricate workings, right? Our brains hold on to those things. When we see images and hear words associated with mental illness, those things stick. Drama catches our attention, and media enhances that to get more viewership, right? That's why these descriptions come so quick to our mind. But we know that those images couldn't be further from the truth, really, and are not the reality of people with mental illness. This is the reality. The reality of mental illness is in these images. The person might be a celebrity, it might be someone we look up to, someone we can relate to, it might be us. Maybe it's a neighbor, a loved one. Mental illness affects every age, every race, every gender, every occupation. It does not discriminate. And once we understand that, we can better understand that it's okay to talk about mental illness because it is, in fact, so common, especially now when there are so many other factors in our lives as teachers and school staff that really impact our ability to feel successful, to feel like we are doing what we are passionate about and came here to do. And when you're struggling through some of those pieces, especially in the winter, when it is dark often and cold weather impacts our ability to be out there and doing more physical activity, lots of these pieces contribute. And so it's even more common right now in our profession and in our area to feel these strong feelings and to navigate mental illness and mental wellness and well-being. It is okay to have a mental illness, and many of us do. Mental illness is as common as silver cars. 1 in 5 adults will experience a mental illness. 1 in 10 have diabetes. So let's pause for a minute and look at that fact. 1 in 10 have diabetes, and 1 in 5 have mental illness. Mental illness is incredibly common. This is why it matters so much. We need to make it okay to discuss it, to plan around it, to support it, to prevent it. And those things cannot happen without ongoing dialogue and reducing the stigma and making it easier for people to speak openly about what they are experiencing and why. This is why learning, talking, and sharing are 3 key components of Make It Okay are so important. It will help to stop the stigma. And it makes it harder for people who do have some of these misunderstandings or previous learnings. It makes it harder for them to continue with those beliefs when we're able to say these hard facts. 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 10 have diabetes. When we can consider the medical components and look at mental illness as a medical issue, that is where we're going to really support healing and progress and moving forward. All right, so let's talk a little more about stigma. I'd like to try something. I want you all to just say out loud or think in your mind if you're more comfortable at home the first words that come to mind when thinking about or describing someone with cancer. Those words come pretty quickly to our minds, and those are all reassuring terms and rightfully deserved by those that experience cancer. Words like brave, strong, warrior. Let's do the same thing, but with the first words you think of or have heard others use to describe people who have mental illness. Now, when this is done in person, people will raise their hands and say things like crazy, nuts, OCD. Again, those words come pretty quick to mind. And we may not feel as comfortable saying these words because they have negative meanings. People don't always want to raise their hand and say them out loud. And in past experience, that has been what has happened, right? We've lined up words like fighter when it comes to someone experiencing cancer, and the other more negative terms with somebody experiencing mental illness. And what's important is that people that experience mental illness are just as deserving of the words warrior, fighter, brave. So why do you think there's such a great difference in the words used to describe the 2 illnesses? Why are there more negative thoughts and emotions that come to mind when someone is experiencing a mental illness? The answer can be tracked back to stigma surrounding mental health. Stigma impacts how each of us thinks about, talks about, or even treats people experiencing a mental illness, whether we know it or not. It doesn't allow us to see two people with different conditions as equally strong, and it's important to see both people as strong and working hard. Therefore, we all can start eliminating stigma today, not only by learning and understanding that mental illness is a medical condition, just like cancer, diabetes, strep, but also by starting to change the words that we are commonly using in our vocabulary when we describe mental illness. Rather than saying, I'm so OCD about my desk, replace that with empathy. I can't imagine that person is experiencing, or I prefer to have my desk really organized. Using words that don't continue to add to that stigma and misusing terms that can be negatively connected to mental illness. How will we know when we've made progress in this area? We'll know that we've made progress when the words are used to describe both mental illness and cancer, just like any other medical condition. We are taught as children about illness, like colds, broken bones, or surgeries, but mental illness is not discussed. Mental illness should be discussed like diabetes. It needs to be seen as a normal illness. This quote does a great job of stating just that. It also does a great job of capturing the true message of Make It Okay. This is just one of many quotes that has been received from the Impact Survey, which we'll talk more about in a later slide. In short, though, this survey is a scientific survey done through partnership with Make It Okay and Health Partners that is measuring attitudes and awareness around mental health stigma in the communities where Make It Okay is actively used. People have handwritten on the survey expressing their thankfulness and gratitude that this survey is asking them about mental illness, because so often no one is asking them about it. The reason why this matters so much is that stigma is the greatest barrier to individuals seeking help regarding their mental illness. We know that only about 50% of individuals with mental health needs are seeking support for that need. Stigma causes shame, isolation. It can impact jobs, education, attendance. And those that experience severe symptoms often experience poor physical health, which can also lead to legal issues and even loss of life. Each of these factors that can delay care, and without care, symptoms worsen. We also know that for every person who has lived with a mental illness, it also impacts the people that love and care for them. And if you feel comfortable, I'd like for you to think for a minute if you or someone close to you has ever experienced a mental illness. It could be yourself, a family member, or a close friend. Typically, the majority, if not all, hands go up in a room. Because remember that 1 in 5 people experiences a mental illness, and these people touch many lives. We all often know our family history regarding diabetes or heart disease, but we might not know all of our family history regarding mental illness. Again, it can be hard for people to see a mental illness the same way we see a physical illness, and they might get tongue-tied when it comes to talking about it. Or they might feel it's more protective to not share some of that history. All right, so let's take a few moments to think about the stigma that we carry ourselves. Even as a clinical social worker who has worked in residential treatment, and I worked in elementary and secondary school settings and alternative settings, there are a variety of life experiences that we all show up with, and different personal biases or worldviews that are going to impact the way that we perceive every single situation. So think to yourself, how do I feel when interacting with a person experiencing mental illness? And then ask yourself, am I more comfortable helping a person who has a physical illness than I am helping a person who has a mental illness? There is no right or wrong answer. There is a sliding scale for each of these questions, and I will ask you to reflect on that. One question you may shift more to the red, the others more to the blue. It's important that we take the time to think about these questions so we can better support someone experiencing mental illness. So looking at the scale, strongly agree to strongly disagree. Where did you fall for your comfort in interacting, or your comfort level with helping someone with a physical or mental illness? And why do you think for most, it might be easier to help someone with a physical illness and harder to help someone with a mental illness? Sometimes people say it's because they don't feel qualified to help with mental health. Physical health seems more direct and mental health seems more complex. That's something we talk often about. A lot of teachers come and connect with me about, I just don't know what to say for this student, for example, who is self-harming or struggling with depression. I don't know the right words. I don't know what their treatment is. I don't know. I'm not a mental health professional. And the true answer is you do not need to be a mental health professional. As humans, we seek connection, right? We seek somebody who is going to listen to us or validate us. And that itself is enough. That smile in response, not leaving that big silence, but saying, I am here for you. Even to say, I don't know the right answer and I am here and let's figure it out together. That can be huge for our students or our staff who are seeking additional support and who've confided in you. All right, next we're going to reflect on this question. I would see myself as weak if I had mental illness and could not fix it myself. Strongly agree or strongly disagree? Which side where does your arrow fall? This question focuses on yourself. The other ones we were talking about other people. But who finds that they're tougher on themselves than on others? That it's okay for other people to experience mental illness, but not yourself. Why do you think we're harder on ourselves? And maybe this has changed. Maybe we think back to 3 years ago. Would you answer this differently? Or last year, would you answer it differently? This school year, would you answer it differently? How have you evolved in that personal view? People in my community are not caring towards people with mental illness. Strongly agree, strongly disagree. Community could be defined in a lot of different ways here too. You might be thinking, well, I don't know. My community might be your workplace, your faith community, your family, your neighborhood, your literal geographic community. And as you think about some of those different communities I listed, you might consider whether or not you agree with this statement. People in my community are not caring towards people with mental illnesses. This might be a question where the sliding scale comes into play because you might feel, though, the community is very caring towards some people, while another one might not be. In fact, according to that impact survey that I referenced, that scientific survey that Make It Okay and Health Partners Institute work on, 3 out of 4 people strongly agree with the statement and believe that their community is not caring towards people with mental illness. It is important to recognize that these questions each measure a different lens of stigma. The stigma we have towards others, the stigma we have towards ourselves, and the stigma others have towards those around them. In order for Make It Okay for others to experience mental illness, we need to make it okay for ourselves to experience mental illness as well. So lastly, I'm going to ask, after thinking more about stigma and how it impacts those with mental illness, how might you show up differently for your family, for your friends, in your community? Or how might you respond to others to help in creating a more caring community? Next, we're going to hear a piece from Daniel's story. Let's listen as he talks about how mental illness is perceived in his culture and by those around him.
So stigma is a big stumbling block when it comes to recovering from mental illness. Now, just as much as I was getting this diagnosis, my family and loved ones also were getting this because they were not experienced in living with someone that lives with mental illness. But there was sort of some stigma there. Like I said, I'm originally from Nigeria, and it's one of those cultures where mental illness is something that's not spoken about. It definitely occurs, but it's not spoken about. While they struggled with it, they just were very supportive. But I think where the stigma was glaring and scary was in the community and even amongst friends. I've lost a number of friends after my diagnosis of mental illness.
This subject is not a popular subject in the African American community, Dan, because labeling, for instance, and stereotyping. What have you discovered about that?
Yeah, I think the key word there that I pick up on is stereotype. And, I think in a lot of communities, but especially in the African American community, there's a stereotype of what a man is supposed to be or what a woman, a mother is supposed to be.
Daniel isn't the only one who has had an experience like this. Many cultures do not accept mental illness as an illness. Some cultures, in fact, do not even have the language to describe what a mental illness is. Mental illnesses are not a part of their vocabulary, and because of this, there's a great stigma around mental illness. So just as Daniel talked about stigma in his community, I'd like you to think about your own community again, whatever that means to you, whether it's family, friends, faith, community, school, workplace, and whether you live in a more urban or rural agricultural community. How do you see stigma showing up in your communities? I ask you to think about a scenario in which you've seen or experienced stigma in your community. You might also have a story of living in different communities and maybe seeing some changes depending on your age, your understanding, as time has passed. If you leave here with nothing else today, these are the most important key messages for us all to take with us. These messages are woven throughout the entire Make It Okay campaign, and they are that mental illness is common, it is treatable just like a health condition. 1 in 5 people, in fact, will develop a mental illness at some point in their lifetime. Again, putting that into perspective, about 1 in 10 have diabetes. It's as common as left-handed people, silver cars. We talked about it being treatable, just as a health medical condition. It's not a moral failure. It's not a sign of weakness. It can disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and overall daily functioning. Most mental illnesses can be treated effectively with medication, therapy, diet, exercise, and support, just like diabetes or heart disease. Recovery and healing is possible. It's also really important to know that we want our kids in schools to know that you can have mental illness and continue to be successful. You can attend school, you can have a job, you can do things. For some individuals, when we first discover our mental illness or when we've been experiencing it for a long time, it can be difficult to shift into feeling functional. You might initially feel like you cannot do these things. You cannot go to school. It's too hard. There's too much weighing on you. So we really want to keep that message forward that yes, you can be, and we are with you through it, and we will help you. We know stigma is a problem because it keeps people from getting the treatment that they deserve. We know something as simple as talking openly about it really is the key to reducing that stigma. And we know that it can save lives. While not all mental illnesses have tragic results of the loss of life, they certainly affect other people's health. And the earlier that they get the care they need, the better. And stigma is a barrier to getting that care. It is never too late or too early to get help for mental illness. Early identification and getting connected to support, the earlier the better. Don't accept symptoms of mental illness as a norm for your health, no matter how long you've been experiencing them. We know we can all do better to help reduce the stigma, so people will get the treatment they need and the treatment they deserve. Again, it's okay. It's a medical condition. It's not a character flaw. We may not know everything about mental illnesses, but we do know that they are biological in nature. They can disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and their daily functioning. They result from a person's environment, genetics, chemical imbalances, and trauma. And just like physical illnesses, there are different causes to different mental illnesses. We have learned through research that when people understand that the person isn't to blame for their mental illness, they don't fault them. And when they better understand that it is a treatable condition, just like other medical conditions, they better understand people with mental illness deserve to get the help that they need. So, what are some common symptoms? Make It Okay is not intended to diagnose or treat mental illness, but it's good to know that there are symptoms associated with various diagnoses. This list is not exclusive or exhaustive. These symptoms are different than other illnesses, in that we can't detect in a blood test or a lump on the skin. Some symptoms do make it seem like the person can or could control it, so it's important to get to know that symptoms may show up differently for different diagnoses. Some common symptoms of mental illness include persistently sad or irritable, changes in sleep, energy, or appetite, difficulty thinking, concentrating, remembering, lack of intense pleasure, grandiose plans, impulsivity, delusions, hallucinations, pounding heart, sweating, trembling, dizzy. Keep your eyes peeled for these different symptoms and be open to holding some dialogue with individuals around you if they come forward to share their worries or concerns about these symptoms as they present. Again, this presentation's purpose is not to diagnose, but to help everyone become familiar with different diagnoses and recognize that it's important to ask your health provider about symptoms that may arise. Just as there is a word for the medical condition, there are words for different mental illnesses. It can take weeks to months or even years to come to a diagnosis and must be made by a physician. It's important to practice saying these words out loud. We shouldn't whisper the word bipolar. We shouldn't be afraid of the word schizophrenia. Getting comfortable with these words and learning more about them is the first step to stopping stigma. There are several common mental illnesses: major depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, anxiety and panic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, borderline personality disorder, and substance use disorders. Please note that not all people with mental illnesses have a substance use disorder, nor do all people with substance use disorder have a mental illness. There are definitions and more stories about each of these illnesses if you're interested at makeitokay.org on their website. It's okay to have a mental illness because mental illnesses are treatable and recovery is possible. A combination of treatment and support can be a part of everyone's individualized plan. Does that mean that you won't have to think about or experience any more symptoms? No. Like a physical illness, a mental illness has a chronic component, but proper social support, therapy, medications, nutrition and exercise, and other self-care, just like conditions such as diabetes, can help manage and reduce the impact of those symptoms. I want to focus on medications for a moment. It's important to note that taking a medication for mental illness is not a sign of failure. Some illnesses require medication as best practice for treatment and for a high quality of life. Again, just like diabetes or high blood pressure, etc. The sooner people get treatment, the greater the chances of recovery. As with any illness, it's better to identify and treat early before someone becomes seriously ill. In order to make it okay, we need to show up differently. We need to be supportive. And the question is, how do we do that, right? How do we make sure that we are showing up as we intend to? Tips for supporting someone. In order to make it okay, we need to show up differently. We need to be supportive. And how do we do that? So we want to stop the silence surrounding mental illness. Silence can be deafening when someone reaches out for help and they're met without a response. We want to make sure that we're being nice. Yes, I shouldn't have to say that on this slide, but people with mental illness have told us that yes, unfortunately, we do need to leave it on here. Continue to remind people that kindness, empathy, and compassion go a long way. Be kind, be nice. Really listen, not with the intent to speak or judge, but listening to understand. Keep in contact. It can be difficult for someone experiencing a mental illness to pick up a phone or write or text, so persistence can be important. Be the one to call or text first. It might not be balanced back and forth, and it's important that you continuously reach out. Don't ignore it. Offer to help. Ask them, what can I do to help? It might be helping with the kids, driving them to an appointment. Offer to help in the same way that you would if they had a physical condition. Keep the conversation moving. Mental illness is a part of someone, but not all of them. Ask them for how they're doing, and then move on and talk about other parts of their life as well. Offer to connect them to resources or to engage in self-care together. And self-care doesn't always need to be those things that are really stereotypical, right? Going to yoga or doing some mindfulness. Yes, they're great. And definitely if that is what is the person is interested in, then do those activities. There are also ways that connecting is self-care. Sitting together and watching Netflix, going on a walk, doing any activity that they enjoy, reading, sending them things that they might be interested in, sending them good books, sending them um, those meal kits or different things like that. Those are all ways to encourage and support with the resources. Next, I'm going to just share this video quick. In closing, you can hear how easy it can be to be present and helpful for someone experiencing a mental illness. And let's learn what to say. So this is actually the most visited page on the Make It Okay website. It offers a positive and helpful language, and also some of those negative phrases that aren't as helpful when talking with an individual who's experiencing a mental illness. A lot of us are looking to support those that we care about, and we just might not be sure or as familiar or as used to talking about it directly because of our culture and our climate around us, because of the ways that stigma has prevented that. So it's absolutely okay for each of us to not always feel comfortable with navigating this dialogue. So this sheet is a great example. Try to avoid using those derogatory phrases like crazy or insane, even in your day-to-day speech. One big correction for me personally, I'll own, was saying, "Oh my gosh, that's insane." I shifted to "that's wild," and then I shifted to actually describing what I'm trying to say. So those small steps personally also can assist with just really decreasing that stigma on a day-to-day basis. Saying things like "we've all been there, everyone feels that way," can take away from what the person is feeling. And they're not accurate statements. If you've never suffered from severe depression, for example, we can't really say "I've been there" when they're describing their feelings. And as much as that's coming from a place of care, right? We're trying to relate, we're trying to normalize. It can sometimes invalidate and minimize their emotions. Some other statements that would be better received or more supportive might be, "I'm really sorry to hear that. That must be tough." Or, "Can I drive you to an appointment? Can I cook you a meal?" One thing that I compare it to also is, if you ever had just a really tough day and you are trying to vent to somebody about it, a friend, a spouse, a family member, and you're trying to just really, really vent. You just need to kind of get it out, right? And the person is responding back with things that are suggestions to fix it or to make it better. And it almost makes you angry. Like, no, 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 not looking for that. I'm telling you, this is really frustrating and I'm feeling really frustrated. And what you needed in that moment was someone to say, "Oh my gosh, that is hard. What you're doing is hard." And it almost validates you and your feelings, right? Like, "Yes, it is hard. Thank you for acknowledging that. Yes, that was super frustrating. That I'm mad that that went down that way. I'm not sure how to handle it." So just thinking about that as a listener, that sometimes our intention with people who are grieving or people with mental illness is to try to make them feel better by providing solutions. And what's really helpful is to try to remember to not dismiss their illness or minimize it, but to be there for them and show up in a way that is genuine. So all of that can be done by listening and talking. And if nothing else, if you don't know what to say, think about what you would say if someone just told you that they had a physical illness, such as cancer, diabetes, and say something like that. If you ever wonder, is this Make It Okay thing, Julia, is it really making a difference? Well, we are. Make It Okay is helping to stop stigma, and yet we know that we still have a lot of work to do. We're measuring that difference through the impact survey. It is unusual to get a positive feedback on a survey, but we are. And it goes to show how important this topic is. The impact survey is a partnership between Make It Okay and the Health Partners Institute. And this scientific survey is measuring attitudes and awareness about mental health stigma in the communities where Make It Okay is active. And the results are important as we measure change over time, with the first survey in 2017 and our 2019 survey results. And now we'll be looking for the 2021 survey results as well. The results of our 2019 impact survey are from the thousands of responses show that community supports for Make It Okay 9 out of 10. So 9 out of 10 people believe it's important to reduce that stigma. We're making progress. Awareness of Make It Okay has increased. Stigma has decreased. And yet it's still important to continue this work because 3 out of 4 people still don't think that the community is caring towards people with mental illness. But this is great news. The community is ready to take action to reduce stigma, and Make It Okay is ready to start as well. With many people also writing thank you on their surveys to tell us that they are so glad that we are asking about mental illness stigma and grateful that we have had these conversations going within their communities. So, where can you or others start to help make it okay? A simple place to begin is by taking the pledge to learn more about mental illness, talk more about it, and the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, just like any physical condition, and share and encourage others to learn more. Take the pledge to make it okay and share those available resources. You could also take it a step further. You could become a Make It Okay ambassador, just like I am, and several of our clinical social workers are in the district. It's a 2 hour free training. An ambassador is someone who has a passion for reducing mental illness stigma in their community. You do not need to be an expert on mental health, but just someone who enjoys connecting, engaging, educating, and promoting mental health awareness. So I encourage you to, if you have other positions or other roles within the community, maybe within your church or within your school or other personal areas where you think it might be beneficial for you to become a Make It Okay ambassador, I highly encourage that. And again, feel free to reach out to me about other supports if you're interested as well. You can also help to just create that community change, right? We start within our home, our family, our friends, and slowly that seed is planted and spreads further and further. Once we get past staying silent, the next step is to be able to help provide resources to people. And this is a great place to start. Each of your schools should be talking about the crisis text line, that's 741-741. We also have a suicide prevention hotline. That's not on here today because it's actually changing in Minnesota right now, too. They're updating nationally that number. But know that 911 should be used in an emergency situation where immediate safety is a concern. So there are county crisis numbers, talk to your primary care doctor, create a health plan. Know that as Anoka Hennepin employees, you also have that Medica Optum resource as well. And just reach out to anybody in your building should you need help that has a medical or a mental health license, excuse me. A school social worker would be a great resource. A school counselor can support you, and a school psychologist can support you as well. As we think about Make It Okay at any particular time, it's always important, but taking action to reduce stigma towards people affected by mental illness is more important than ever in today's world. The world we're living in right now, where we are also dealing with the reality of a pandemic and racial justice movement. At makeitokay.org/COVID-19, you can find very important resources to help support those living with mental illness during this time. There are also resources available. Here are just a few, but know that there's a podcast platform here. The Hilarious World of Depression and Tremendous Upside can be found at any podcast platform that you use. The National Alliance on Mental Illness has a ton of resources as well. You can access those through Google. And if you're interested in deepening or understanding and skills regarding mental illness, look for the Question, Persuade, Refer training and mental health first aid trainings on Eventbrite for free courses. The QPR is a 1 hour training and mental health first aid is an 8 hour training. Mental health first aid is as it sounds. It's pretty basic, just rundown of various mental illnesses and then how do you support those individuals. Additionally, Anoka Hennepin does have, if you look on our Parent Engage 360, we have some interviews with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Sue Aberholden, and some trainings available as well through Anoka Hennepin. There's a link to this video here. We can all make it okay. I'm not going to go through it today, but you're welcome to view it independently. I will send it to each of you who registered for this course. We've covered a lot today regarding mental illness and stigma surrounding it and what we can do to stop that silence. This is a really tough topic to tackle, so I encourage you to take some time today to unwind, take care of yourself, to digest this information. And in closing, I want to remind you that resources are available for those who want to learn more about mental illness and what you can do to help. And if you're interested in becoming a Make It Okay ambassador or learning more about it, please connect back with me. I would like to end our time together today with a closing video. Again, I'll play it. I understand if you don't have time to finish it up here, as this video is a little longer than 45 minutes here. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to learn more about what you can do to help make it okay and to have mental illness in the everyday dialogue and decreasing that stigma. Thank you for taking time to open up your minds and your hearts to this important topic. And thank you for making it okay.
A few years ago, I lost a job because of stigma.
Stigma, it prevented me from getting employment. It prevented me from
maintaining jobs.
I've lost a lot of good friends due to stigma.
Stigma made me hide my truth and who I really am.
It kept me feeling isolated and just resulted in more loneliness and more opportunity for the illness to continue rather than get better.
Stigma for me made it very difficult to even access services when I first experienced mental illness.
Stigma has made me feel more alone and like I couldn't connect with anyone.
Thank you for taking this time to educate yourselves and learn more.
I appreciate anybody who opens their mind and heart to learning more about mental illness and taking the power away from stigma.
And without your help, we can't completely eradicate the discrimination that people living with mental illness and their family members experience. I really want to thank you for taking an interest in this and doing this activity, and I hope that that will help others to experience less of that stigma.
I really appreciate that you are taking the time to look within yourself and to think about how stigma does affect someone with a mental illness and how you can help be a part of a solution towards making it easier for someone to access the help that they need.
I really appreciate you taking the first step to end this stigma.
Thank you for reflecting on the impact of stigma.
I want to thank you for making it so that anyone else doesn't have to feel alone and that they know that someone cares for them.